This is Chapter 8 of Lucky Lure at Arrow Point by Mary Daem, coming to you from my sunny front porch. The Minto brought the fisherman on its next trip. Captain Jones eased the big boat carefully alongside the wharf. He put his head out of the wheelhouse window and called down to Jamie. Jamie felt very important. "Caught any fish yet, Jamie?" he called. Jamie was suddenly shy. He shook his head. Minty wiggled and tried to get down. The fishermen came down the gangplank, their hands filled with fishing gear. Jamie remembered what his grandmother had said about fishermen coming when they thought there were fish to be caught. He swallowed, and then he found his voice and his courage and shouted, "There's a big fish under the dock here. Grandma and I saw him, and he's a whopper. I think maybe he's a whale." There was delighted laughter from the passengers. Captain Jones didn't laugh, though his face got suspiciously red. "You be down here waiting when we go back. We're coming in with groceries, and I'll have something for you." Jimmy tried to say thank you, but he couldn't. The boat backed out, and Mrs. Turner called him over and introduced him to the fishermen. Then she invited them up to her house for raisin buns and chocolate cake. Even fishermen would forget about fishing for a feast like that. Jamie tagged along behind the adults, and Minty tagged along behind him. Jamie felt shy, but he felt excited too, for wasn't Captain Jones going to bring him a present? And he hadn't laughed about the fish either. And then Jamie laughed at himself. He'd forgotten to look to see if it was still there. As soon as the fisherman left for the little house, Jamie started asking if it was time for the Minto to return. He asked 12 times in as many minutes. "Jamie, why are you pestering me like that? The boat won't be back for 3 or 4 hours." "But I don't want to miss it. Captain Jones said he'd bring me something, and I didn't ask. Honest, I didn't." Mrs. Turner rumpled his yellow hair. You could see she remembered how impatient a small boy could be. "What do you say we pack a picnic and go down to the wharf and wait? I can make you some dough bait, and you can try fishing. We'll have to wear sun hats, but there's some shade from the shed." "Grandma," Jamie fairly danced with excitement, "you're the nicest grandmother a boy ever had. I'm so glad you're mine." It was a lovely picnic. The basket was packed as if they were going for miles and miles. Jamie carried a bamboo rod, which had hung on the wall of the bedroom for years, waiting for him to use it. His pocket held a big blob of flour and water dough, and Minty tagged along at his heels, giving yelps of excitement whenever he thought of it. Mrs. Turner placed the basket carefully in the shade and pulled the old rocker from its place in the shed and took her knitting out. Jamie pulled the dough from his pocket out and carefully baited the hook on the end of his line. He tried 3 times before he got the dough to stay on. He was shaking with eagerness as he leaned over the edge of the wharf. "Sit down, Jamie, please, so you won't fall in." Jamie sat down and dangled the line over the edge of the wharf. "I can't see the big fish," he said, peering into the water. "The boat probably scared it away." Minty looked into the water too, but since he could not see anything either, he flopped down beside his master and went to sleep. Jamie held the pole until he thought his arms were going to break. He had just turned around to say something to his grandmother when something pulled on the line. Jamie nearly dropped his pole. "What do I do? What do I do? I've got a fish!" Jamie shouted. He nearly toppled into the lake in his excitement, and Minty ran around in circles. "Pull your line up sharply to set the hook." Jamie tugged. A fish came up out of the water. It wiggled and flashed, and then the line hung empty. Jamie opened his mouth. He almost cried. "Now that was a good start," his grandmother comforted. "Put some fresh dough on your hook and try again." Jamie did. He sat and he sat. The water was so still and clear that he could see small minnows swimming around the bait and making tiny nibbles. Suddenly they scattered. A fish came right up to the dough, opened its mouth, swallowed, and was caught tight. Jamie yanked as hard as he could, and the fish came up and flopped onto the end of the wharf. Mrs. Turner dropped her knitting, and the ball of blue wool rolled away with Minty after it. Wool, dog, fishing line, boy, and fish were all tangled up together. "Just stay still," Mrs. Turner ordered when she could speak for laughing. She unwound a length of the wool from the puppy's tail and tucked him under her arm. "Don't lose my fish," Jamie begged, tumbling to get his hands on it. The fish flopped, and Jamie let out a yell that could have been heard clean across the lake. "Isn't he a whopper?" he breathed, when the fish had been wrapped on the head and taken from the hook and strung on a bit of strong string. "He's nearly as big as the one I saw under the wharf." "Well," Mrs. Turner reached for the lunch basket and took off the cover. "I really caught a fish, didn't I?" the little boy exulted as he bit into a sandwich. "It looked like a fish, and it felt like a fish, and it even smelled like a fish, didn't it?" That's the end of chapter 8.